Okay, guys, let's try to work through our first SPSS lesson online. All right, so the first thing we want to do is get our data file open. All right, and so we're going to work on opening that, and we're going to rename it for reasons to be explained soon. And we're going to go through, I would call it some data managing or data cleaning steps, just to get our file in the cleanest, clearest way possible. We're going to work on some data cleaning of recoding reverse items, and then we're going to talk at the end a little bit about relationships between variables and reliability. All right, so the first thing we want to do is open the file. You can do that one of two ways. You can do it here by opening SPSS and going under File to Open and a data set, and you would open the file teach that I have uploaded this time, as well as gave you in our first SPSS lesson. Or you simply could go to the file itself on your computer and double click on it, and it will necessarily open in SPSS. So you've got a couple ways to do that, and you can see here I have opened my 724_teacher data file. All right, and so we've got our, if you just recall, we've got our 5 teachers in here, and we have our 39 variables. All right, so what we want to do is, the very first thing we want to do is we want to save our data under a new file name. And the reason is, let's assume this is our master data file. All right, it is our raw data, we've done nothing to it, and we typically always want to keep that file as is. We don't want to make changes to our master data file. Heaven forbid something goes wrong, which I can tell you it has, and it does. All right, so the first thing we want to do here with our data file is go into File, Save As, and we could call this anything we want. I'm just going to date it today, so this is my teacher data file dated for today. And let's say I wanted to only work with some of these variables. We could always click on variables, and we could select just the variables we want in our new data file. But obviously here I want all the data files, so I'm going to ignore that, and I'm simply going to say save, and it's going to automatically save to where my raw data is, which is in my Dropbox folder. So I can say save. All right, and so notice now I am working in my teacher data file dated for today. All right, and sorry guys, I'm not using slideshow because I'm going to be going back and forth. All right, so the first thing we want to do is create labels for a few of our variables. So last time we worked on actually naming variables. We had understand and teacher strategy. And then we've just got a few items here. They're actually numbered item 3 through, I believe, 31. All right, so what we actually want to do is we want to create labels. And so when you're working with these variables, it'll come up under the label name, which sometimes helps for clarity. So we don't have to keep in our mind what is item 3, what is item 4. All right, so what I'm going to do here, so we've got understanding. Here, I'm going to move this over here so we can see them both at the same time. So I'm looking at my data file. Here is the label. And so for this understand variable, if I want a label of understanding, I'm just going to highlight it and type understanding. Understanding. All right, and then I'll do the same for teaching strategies and student needs and federal state laws on inclusion. All right, and so I can actually move this over so we can see our 4 labels that we wanted for our items. All right, one nice thing here is that there's no limit to the length. So you can be as detailed in that label as you want. And this is just something that you typically want to do Again, just so that when you're working with the variables, the label comes up in place of the variable name, so you know exactly what it is you're working with. All right, and so let's just work with these. Let me show you see how the label pops up in the descriptive statistics instead of the variable name. So let's just run descriptives on those 4 items that we just labeled. So just as a reminder, we go into Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, into Descriptives. All right, and you see here now we've got our label instead of the variable name. So we've got a couple things we can do. I can double click on it to move it over. I can highlight it and then click the arrow, or I can use my command key to highlight both of them and move them over. So we've got a couple options there. And we just want to say okay. All right, and oops. All right, and so there we see our descriptives table. We've got our 5 teachers. We see our minimum values, our maximum values, our means for these variables, as well as our standard deviation. All right, this is something that you'll do on your own for your data file. So this is a practice for you. So you notice down here at the end where we have our yes/no questions. All right, so special education classes. So I believe this was an interest in training in these things. All right, so or you would take more classes in the following areas. And so you're going to create a label here for special education classes, and you're going to create a label for cooperative learning classes. You may want to pause the video and do that now. All right. Let's go back to our data file for a second. So here under values is where you can put into the data file your Likert scale or your yes/no or your male/female. This is really, really helpful for your qualitative variables like gender and race. It's always helpful to know, because if you're just working with 0s and 1s or 1s and 2s or 1, 2, 3s and 4s, it's so helpful to know what those are, especially when you start running analyses on gender. You want to know which one is male and which one is female. And when you're working with multiple data sets, you know, when they're coded 0, 1, or 0's male, or 0, 1, where 0's female, or 1, 2, where 2 is female, it gets very confusing to go back and forth. And so it's so helpful to put values in here. So what we're going to do, is basically for items 1 through 31, so from understanding all the way down here to item 31, we're on a 5-point Likert, all right, where 0 means strongly disagree and 4 means strongly agree. All right, and we want to put these values in. All right, so we're gonna, let's go to the next one first. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll see here. So let's go to understand, and we click on our value. All right, so when I click on the side of it, let's do that again one more time. So you see these ellipses here, we're going to click on that, and our value labels box pops open. All right, and what we want to do is in value, type a 0 with the label of strongly disagree, and then we'll add it to our values box, and we're going to do the same thing for 4 strongly agree. All right, so let's go back over here. We'll type a 0 for strongly disagree, and we're going to add it, and we're going to do the same thing for 4 strongly agree. All right, and simply say okay. All right, and so I'll show you. So now we've got our 0 strongly agree to 0 to 4 strongly agree. And what we want to do is we want to carry this through all the way down to item 31. And what you don't want to do is type this in 31 times. What you do want to do is you want to come here and right click. No, we cannot right click. All right, I've got this highlighted, and I can do either edit copy, all right, or I I did a Command C on the Mac for copying, and then I'm going to highlight all the way down to item 31, and I can either do Edit Paste or I could do Command V. All right, but I have all my values now recorded for my items from understanding down to item 31. All right, now for your practice, what you want to do, is you want to do the same thing for item 33 or item 32 really, through item 36. So the special education classes to other classes, what you want to do here is put in a 0 for no and a 1 for yes. All right, so again, you're going to add your own values here for these 5 types of classes. Again, you may want to pause the video and do that now. All right, so just as a recall from our first lesson a couple weeks ago, all right, what we're going to do is we are going to calculate frequency. So I guess I actually need to go ahead and put it in for special education classes. So I've got 0 is no, and I've got 1 is yes. All right, and so what we want to do is we want to just calculate frequency tables for understanding and special education classes. All right, so as a reminder of how to do that, I'm going to go into Analyze Descriptive Statistics, Frequencies. All right, what do I want frequencies on? I want frequencies on understanding, and I want frequencies on special education classes. All right, I could choose to add statistics to these frequencies, but I'm not interested in that. I just want to say okay. All right, and so here's our frequencies for understanding. All right, so nobody strongly disagreed. We've got one person who was a 2, which we would interpret that as slightly disagree. And we could have always put that in our values if we wanted to. We've got 3 people who said probably what would be slightly agree, and then we've got 1 person who said strongly agree. All right, and then for special education classes, we've got 4 people who said no, and we've got 1 person who said yes. All right, so this is a big one, and to me, this is probably one of the more difficult things we're going to do today, but it is so important. And I know some of you, I'm thinking of one group in particular that I feel like has some reverse items or negatively worded items. And so when we have the negatively worded items, we want to reverse code them so that they're in the same direction as the positively worded items. All right, and so what we want to do, so if we want to create a total score, all right, so here, if we want to create a total score that measures general attitudes towards inclusion, all right, with a low score indicating a negative attitude and a high score indicating a positive attitude, then the reverse items pose a problem, all right, because we need them reversed, or their Likert scales flipped, so that they are oriented in the same way as all the inclusion items. All right, and so if we go back to the survey, we'll see that items 3, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, and 19 are all negatively worded, and you don't have to trust me here. I've got them for you. And so these on the strongly agree here would be measuring teachers who have some negative attitudes or perspectives about inclusion. For example, other students miss too much time of the instructional time they would regularly have. I do not have sufficient knowledge to address the needs of special education students. See how they're negatively or reversely worded. All right, so what we want to do to reverse code them is we want to go to transform, recode into different variables. All right, so here's our data file, and we're going to go to transform, and down to recode into different variables. Now, let's just talk briefly about this. I bring it up in the Word document I uploaded, but let's talk about the difference between recode into same variables and recode into different variables. So basically, we want to flip these Likert scales. But it's also completely possible that we might want access to the raw data if we're thinking about maybe in terms of measuring two different factors, like maybe measuring a negative attitudes factor and then maybe measuring a positive attitudes factor. Here, what we actually want to do is just add them all together for a total attitude variable. All right, so if we were to go into recode into same variable, then you just click your variables, you establish what your new values are going to be, and you say okay. And if we were to do this for, say, item 3, all right, student needs, then we lose the original student needs, which I just don't like to do. I like to always have the original data. All right, so we are going to go into transform, recode into different variables. All right, and we've got items, let's just do this. We got 3, and I'm going to use my command key to do multiple highlights. 3, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, and 19. All right, so I'm going to move them into my variable box here. Now, you notice how you see a question mark here, like item 3 is now going to what? Well, our new item 3 needs a name. And so what I always do is rev underscore item 3. So this is going to be my reverse coded item 3. All right, and if you're happy with that, again, you can name it anything you want. I just prefer to let myself know that it is a reverse coding of the original item. Then you click on change and you see that, okay, item 3 is now we're going to change some values, and it's going to be recorded into a new variable called rev underscore item 3. We want to do that for each of our items. So we're going to have rev underscore item 9, change, rev underscore item 11, change, rev underscore item 12, change, rev underscore item 13, change, and rev underscore item 14, rev underscore item 16, and our last one, rev underscore item 19. Okay, so now we need to tell them, okay, we need to tell the software, okay, what are our new values given the old values? So we're going to click on old new values. All right, now remember our 0 to 4 scale needs to get flipped so that the old 0 is now a 4, and we'll just go through our Likert. So our old 0, so the old value 0 is going to be a new value 4, and we add it to our old to new box. All right, our old value 1 is going to be a new value of 3. Our old value 2 is going to be a new value of, what do you think? Well, it stays 2, but we've got to tell them, so we've got a couple options here. I just tend out of habit to just, for consistency, I say my old value 2 is going to be my new value 2 because that's the middle number. Or you could just click on this and say copy old value, either one. All right, our old value 3 is now a new value of 1, and our old value 4 is a new value of 0. All right, so notice here we are just flipping our Likert scale for this item. All right, and we'll say continue. All right, and from that we'll say okay. All right, so our output box says it's recoded our items. All right, and so here is our reverse coded items are now available. All right, and so let's just take a look at this from a data standpoint. All right, so teacher 1, item 3 is, let's not look at item 3, let's look at the second teacher. All right, so teacher 106. Item 3 was a 3. So we know that in reverse code item 3, this teacher should have a value of 1. So let's go over to, all right, so reverse code item 3, and there is our 1 for that teacher. It has been reverse coded. All right, notice that in creating these items, for some reason, SPSS said, oh, this is a nominal measure. Well, it's not a nominal measure, right? It's a scale measure. We purposely recalled all of these scale measures. So to fix this problem, we would just click on our scale and copy that value and paste scale for those variables. All right, so again, here's the PowerPoint, just walking you through renaming. All right, and so now that we have reverse coded our items, all right, we can calculate our new variable attitude. All right, so we want to go into transform and compute variable. Now, one thing that's not necessarily clear in my PowerPoint is that we're going to have to be careful, right? So when we go into transform compute variable, all right, we're going to call this attitude. All right, you've got a couple options here. You can do a variable and a plus symbol and another variable and a plus symbol, or you can do sum and you can do one variable, comma, another variable, comma. All right, so it doesn't matter. Either one works. But notice we've got all of our original items, 3, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, and 19 that we reverse coded. They're in here, and we do not want to select them. We don't want the original, right? We want the reverse coded. So we're going to have to be careful here to get our reverse coded ones down here and not the original items. All right, so I've got a list next to me of these numbers, 3, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, 19. So I'm just going to skip them along the way. So I've got 1, 2, 3, I'm skipping, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 we're skipping, 10, 11 we're skipping, 12 we're skipping, 13 we're skipping, 14 we're skipping, 15, 16 we're skipping, 17, 18, and I believe, let me double check, yep, we're just going through 22. All right, so 19 we're skipping, 20, 21, 22. All right, now we need to scroll down and get all of our reverse items. Okay, and so after reverse item 19, I'm going to close my parentheses and I'm going to say okay. All right, so you can see here that we are computing this new variable attitude by summing all of our variables that we selected. And we can see here in our variable view that we now have attitude. All right, and we can go over to our data view here and we see this attitude calculation for each of our teachers. All right, and just to double check, let's run descriptives. So we go into analyze, descriptives. All right, and let's get rid of all these. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and select attitude. All right, and so there is our attitude descriptive. All right, so Our mean is 57.8, and we have our standard deviation. All right, oops, I don't know what happened here. I'll just fix this while I'm talking to you guys. All right, so now let's talk about bivariate correlations between variables. So sometimes you've heard me say to all of you at different times that I can see from your concept map, we're going to be looking at correlations among your constructs. All right, so what do we want to look at correlations? We want to look at correlations between class, which we calculated in lesson 1. I don't know why everything got moved, so weird. Okay, which we did in lesson 1, and then we've got attitude. All right, so let's go into analyze, down to correlate, and over to bivariate. All right, so this basically means we're looking at the correlation among two variables. All right, so I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to select class and I'm going to select attitude. All right. We tend to leave it on Pearson when we are treating the variables as continuous, which we are doing here for this Likert scale. If you are treating your Likert as ordinal, so categorical ordinal, or you only have 4 points to your scale, you tend to, once you go down to 4 points, you'll think of it as ordinal. Then we would select Spearman instead of Pearson, but we'll talk more about that as we get closer to the final project. All right, and so we see that attitude in class was a sum on willingness to take other classes. So we see that willingness to take other classes and attitude on inclusion are negatively correlated. I guess I should also add, let's go back to our, all right, the p-value on this correlation is not significant, which is basically saying we can interpret this correlation value as 0, meaning they're just not linearly correlated. All right, now let's run reliability on a scale. So this is a big one that we've been talking about. So is our scale reliable? All right, and so what we want to do here is basically look at all the items we use to calculate attitude. So we want to move items 1 through 22, all right, into our reliability analysis. But we've got to be careful again. So let's go into analyze, and we're going down into scale and over to reliability. All right, so our items, we want 1 through 22, but remember, we've got our reverse coded separately there. So we need to make sure that we get our reverse coded items for 3, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, and 19, and not the original items. So I'm going to go 1, 2, skip 3, we want 4, 5, and I'm just going to again use command to do multiple highlights. So 6, 7, 8, skip 9, we want 10, skip 11, 12, 13, 14, we want 15, skip 16, we want 17 and 18, skip 19, and we want 20 and 21. All right, and then we want all of our reverse coded items. All right, let me double check it was through 21. Oh, it's through 22, so let's go back. Oops, my mistake. And we'll grab 22. All right. All right, so now we've got our reliability analysis in there. Let's click on statistics to see what our options are. All right, so you can get descriptives for the item, the overall scale. You can get the scale if item deleted. All right, and we can get a lot of descriptive summaries. We can get covariances. What do I use in the real world? What we tend to want, we're going to get reliability for the scale, and that's going to be the main reason we're running this test. But we also would like to see scale if item deleted. So let's say your reliability comes out to be 0.71, but you have the reliability for all the items if each one is deleted. And let's say that for item 3, if we delete it, then our reliability jumps up to 0.76. Well, that's something we may want to consider. Item 3 might have some problems with it because that's a pretty good gain in reliability. All right, so that's really all we want here, and say okay. All right, so here we see our reliability is 0.524. Let me make sure. All right, so we can see here that our reliability is 0.524, which we know is terrible. 0.7 is about the minimum that we can deal with. All right, but notice here that if we drop understanding, then our reliability goes up to 0.60. That's a big jump. Look here, if we delete item 15, our reliability jumps up to 0.64. Now we're getting close to a good reliability. If we drop our reverse coded item 9, our reliability jumps up to 0.678. And so what this is telling us is that understanding item 15 and reverse coded item 9 are potentially problematic items, especially when it comes to our reliability.